morning. I'm Deborah DeBoer. I'm the Director of Professional Development here at the North Shore-Barrington Association of Realtors, and I am delighted here to be hosting the second of a series of diversity and inclusivity podcasts. My guest this morning is Professor Allison Bethel. She is the head of John Marshall Law School's Fair Housing Clinic. Allison, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I have to tell you, I had the good fortune maybe 2 years ago to attend a seminar that John Marshall was putting on for real estate professionals, where they introduced a book called Reasonable Accommodations and Modifications, a Guide for Housing Professionals. It was one of the best presentations I ever saw, and they made a beautiful guideline that a book about that I still keep as a resource in my library and use quite frequently. I am delighted to have you here this morning. It's been an interesting time in fair housing, Allison. You're going to have to unmute yourself, Allison. Good morning. It's been an interesting time in fair housing, in the fair housing world. What I would ask you to say, it's been an interesting time. That's what I think about a lot. Would you tell us a little bit about what you do, what John Marshall's Fair Housing Clinic does and what you do there?
I sure will. And first, I just want to thank you for having me and taking the time to look at these issues, and thank everybody who's listening now or who may tune in later. The guidebook that you mentioned is a terrific resource. You can find it on our website. We did that in collaboration with the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and I believe it's also on their website as well. The Fair Housing Clinic has been around in Chicago for 30 years. We do fair housing education. We do fair housing enforcement, which means that we file cases involving fair housing issues in various courts and other venues in Chicago, as well as from time to time in matters in other jurisdictions. Primary activity is, of course, training law students and the future generation of civil rights lawyers through the Fair Housing Clinic. We also do fair housing testing, which is an investigative tool that can be very effective in determining whether discrimination has occurred. Last year, the John Marshall merged with the University of Illinois at Chicago, and we are now Chicago's public law school. I'm very excited about the opportunities that this merger has presented for the Fair Housing Clinic to work with other colleges and departments within the university. This kind of multidisciplinary collaboration with like the urban planning schools, the health sciences, and other colleges within the university is going to enable us to address housing issues and discrimination in a more holistic way and in a more robust way that I hope will help improve our situation here in Chicago.
Thank you. The issues that I wanted to start talking about today were persons with handicaps, with disabilities. In your clinic, and that was what I saw John Marshall present was, but in your clinic, can you give me a taste of some of the things that are happening that the people with disabilities are really struggling with? What's going on with that?
Sure. Well, this is a great topic to start with because persons with disabilities, complaints by persons with disabilities is the #1 complained about issue in fair housing. It has surpassed race, and it now actually amounts to about a good third of the cases nationally, and it is the bulk of the cases that we have in the clinic. And I would say that has been the case for the last several years. We also have in the clinic a lot of cases or complaints involving source of income discrimination. And source of income discrimination refers to typically your receipt of government benefits. And this also impacts persons with disabilities, because many people on disabilities may receive, or with disabilities, excuse me, may receive some form of housing assistance. It is also an area that I think many people can identify with, because either they've experienced a disability or someone in their family is living with a disability. And of course, it's something that could happen to any of us at any time. The protections for persons with disabilities includes mental as well as physical disabilities. So it's a very, very broad category. The issues that we see in the clinic and nationally range from reasonable accommodations and modifications, I would say, is perhaps the top issue. But we also have see a lot of still refusals to rent to persons with disabilities, as well as claims involving the terms and conditions within a housing community for persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities account for about 1/3 of the retaliation claims, and intimidation claims filed under the Fair Housing Act. And then, of course, finally, a big issue. And unfortunately, we don't get as many complaints about it because I think people are just weary, but there is a big problem with having housing that is accessible to people with disabilities. That includes the required design and construction features that are necessary to make housing suitable for people with disabilities. And this is a problem, of course, Deborah, that is only going to increase in the future if we don't get a handle on it, quite frankly, and then we don't pay attention to the housing that we are building now and that we will be building, and make sure that it includes the necessary features for people with disabilities.
Ellison, so if I'm a landlord, I'm a housing provider, and someone says, I want to move in your building and I need you to build, and here's what, this is often comes up when we're doing fair housing training, and I want to move in your building, but I need a ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the rest of the tenants are going to be doggone mad because it is a beautiful, it has a Chicago facade. They moved into the building because it has the facade, and now a ramp needs to be built. Mm-hmm. Is there a balance there? I don't mean to put you on the spot about that, but it is.
No, I hear what you're saying, and that is something that we encounter. I would say, first of all, from a legal standpoint, depending on when the building was built, there may or may not be a obligation on the part of the landlord to install the ramp and maintain it. Properties built after a certain date in 1991 have to be accessible to persons with disabilities, and at least provide an accessible entrance, which may include a ramp. But I think the sort of deeper issue coming out of that question is that we as a society, I suggest, need to sort of rethink what is beautiful, okay? And it is beautiful when everyone has access to housing, including the wonderful historic buildings that we have in Chicago and throughout the country. There is a concept that is gaining traction in the housing industry, and it's called universal design. Mm-hmm. And it's a concept that basically sort of embraces features that have typically been like ramps and grab bars and things that have typically been regarded as things needed for people with disabilities, and sort of embracing them for everyone. and saying these are universal concepts, really, that everyone can benefit from. If you've ever had young children, I think you can appreciate how a ramp can make it easier for you to get in and out of a building with a stroller. If you've ever had a temporary disability that makes it such that your mobility is limited, a ramp can be helpful. Or if you're just carrying a lot of stuff, ramps can be
very helpful.
helpful. So the idea that these things are ugly, that they're only for people with disabilities, I suggest we sort of rethink that and reimagine that narrative with a view of building housing that is universally beautiful for all people.
I just saw in Facebook the most gorgeous set of, and they were public stairways, and I put down the architect who had built them. Her name is Cornelia Oberlander. And they are the most beautiful stairs, and she's incorporated stairs and ramps in the most gorgeous, beautiful way that no one would ever say, oh, that's for people who need wheelchairs, or that's for, no, you would just think, my goodness, that's just beautiful. So I think this idea of going ahead with design with a wider range of, with a broader concept of what design can be is an important one.
Yeah, and when you do that, I haven't seen Cornelia's, the building you're talking about, but when we do that, it sort of inspires and motivates a level of creativity really in our design officials and architects and these sorts of creative people that we would not have otherwise. And this is the way we need to be thinking, right, in order to build housing that will be suitable and accessible for people for years and years to come. Right now, you may be, not have a situation that requires any of these features, but that could change tomorrow. Being able to remain in your home, even should that happen, or have wider options to choose from should you decide to move, is what really the Fair Housing Act is all about in terms of providing the most housing opportunities available for people, of course, within their budgets.
Perfect. We've talked about some of the typical issues. One of the big things that has come up is not exactly persons with handicap, it's persons with illness. In the time of pandemic, we are in the real estate industry. I must get a few calls every week. Do I have to sign this disclosure? Do I not have to sign this disclosure? Do I have to tell them this? Can I tell them this? What should I tell them? My clients are asking me this question, that question. We had I know that, for example, years ago when AIDS was a bigger question for people on how to behave with AIDS, it became a question of, if I was a realtor and someone said, did anybody have AIDS in this property? My only answer was, it's not a question I can answer. And it really was not one that I couldn't say, well, I don't know. It was a question that I couldn't answer. When someone says, does anybody have COVID? Has anybody had COVID in here? As a realtor, what's my response to that? What do I need to respond?
Well, I will say that the law continues to evolve in this area, just as the science does. I actually began working in fair housing kind of around the time we were dealing with AIDS. And at that time, Deborah, I was representing housing providers. They had many of the questions that you're raising, as well as, should they limit access to the common areas and pools and saunas and this sort of thing. And as the science around AIDS developed, we were able to, of course, develop better guidance for people on those issues. And that is going to be the same situation with COVID. At This time, I would say, if you're asked that, first of all, you really never want to lie. So if you know of a situation, and you have firsthand knowledge of a situation, then I think you want to tell the truth about it. In most instances, you probably may not have any information or know exactly all what has happened in the building. And I think you just want to say that we are taking precautions recommended by the government officials to keep our residents safe. And that includes, your sanitation procedures. We're working with supporting residents who may need to self-quarantine for whatever reason, and we're doing everything that we can to keep our building safe. And should you move here, we'll continue to do that for you too. Right now, there really hasn't been a case that has dealt exclusively with COVID. We certainly believe that and HUD has stated that COVID is probably a disability within the definition of disability under the Fair Housing Act. I don't want to get into the weeds of the definition under the Fair Housing Act, but suffice it to say, it is a very, very broad definition. So people with COVID are likely covered under the disability provisions under the Fair Housing Act. We have been getting a lot of calls for people concerned with real estate policies, everything from bringing in prospective buyers and renters to show places, to things that are going on within the community. The best general advice that I could give you would be to first of all, follow what the government protocols are saying. And of course, if you have access to counsel, consult with your counsel on a specific situation.
Thank you. Here's the other thing that I get calls all the time about. My client has an emotional support animal. The association says has a limit on, let's just make it a ridiculous situation, has an emotional support animal that's a 100-pound pit bull. And the association says they don't allow anything over 12 pounds, because you and I were talking about 12 pounds this morning. About 12, they don't allow anything over 12 pounds. Can my client bring their dog? Does the association have to let my client and the dog come?
Oh my goodness, Deborah, we receive a lot of complaints and questions as well from both sides of the fence on this issue. And of course, actually, animals and the adoption of animals, right, has become very popular during COVID. And I think one of the good things that I've heard about as a result of COVID is that the shelters are pretty much empty. But it is a concern for housing providers. And let me start with a couple of things. First of all, the Fair Housing Act requires housing providers to make reasonable accommodations in policies, procedures, and practices that allow the person with disability to have an equal opportunity to enjoy the residence. And basically, it's been held fairly consistently that this means that for the most part, pet policies will need to be waived in an appropriate circumstance. So if you do have a weight limit, a breed restriction, or other type of pet policy, if it is running afoul of if a person with a disability has an animal that does not comply with that policy or meet that policy, assuming they have the appropriate backup, you will likely have to waive or modify that policy to allow for the animal. This issue of service animals versus emotional support animals has been the subject of a lot of litigation, and I think because it can be confusing for housing providers. Let me say that there is a difference between support and service animals. They are two different types of animals. However, under the Fair Housing Act, both types of animals have to be allowed in appropriate cases in a housing complex. And this is different from what you have to allow in what we call places of public accommodation, like hotels, motels, movie theaters, restaurants, and things of that nature. In places of public accommodation, the types of animals that must be allowed is more limited. It's only the service animals that must be allowed in those establishments. But in the housing circumstance, both of those animals may need to be allowed if the person has the appropriate backup. Now, this does not mean that you cannot require the adherence to general rules regarding animals, such as they must be, on the leash and pick up the waste and that type of thing. It doesn't mean that those sorts of rules can't be employed. One other thing I would say too, that if the dog or if the animal has a history of aggressive behavior, then a housing provider may try to see if it qualifies under the defense to a fair housing, or excuse me, to a reasonable accommodation claim, which be that it poses an undue risk to the health and safety of the community. But you can't make that determination just based on the fact on the breed, for example. A lot of housing providers have these breed restrictions where they've said, Rottweilers are outlawed, or I'm drawing a blank now, but there are some other breeds that are generally considered bad, and you can't make a determination just on that general view. You really need to look at the animal individually. And I'll just finish that by saying, I know that this presents a challenge for housing providers. I know that from my personal experience as a lawyer representing them. But what I would say too is that these animals, and particularly in this really very stressful environment, these animals, service and support animals, can provide such a relief to tenants, to people, and make it so much better for them to be able to live in their home, that difficult though it is worth it to work with people on that.
Thank you. I kind of believe that. Yeah, being a dog lover myself, I know the comfort that my dogs give me.
Can I share a funny little story here just real quickly? I once had a student who was chronically late to my class, and when I sat down to talk with him, he explained to me that the reason that he was always late was because he had a disabled dog. And the disabled dog required extra attention for him to walk and feed and so forth. And this was the reason that he was always late to my class. And so he said, Professor Bethel, I asked if you would give me a reasonable accommodation as a result of the fact that I have a disabled dog and allow me to come to your class late. And I had to explain to him that the reasonable accommodation does not flow to the animal. It has to be with the person. And his fix for this situation was to get up earlier and deal with the dog. And I wasn't going to give him a pass to come to class late because his dog had these issues.
I love that. Yes, that would have been my take on it as well. Just get up a little earlier, kiddo. I wanted to talk a little bit. I wasn't sure that I was going to talk about this, but it's been so hard to avoid. The issues that we've had in Chicago, the issues that we've had in Sheboygan, the unceasing media coverage of that we are getting on all of these things. The questions that are starting to come, Chicago Agent Magazine talked about is what's happening in Chicago causing people to leave Chicago, to leave the loop, to leave Chicago, to leave. These are all things that are going to be very challenging for realtors with fair housing when people are saying, well, you know, the ultimate question, well, who lives in the neighborhood here? What's going on in the neighborhood here? Give us some advice. Give us some fair housing advice on how to handle ourselves as realtors, doing what is really, for everyone involved, including we in the real estate community, a really challenging time to be working.
Yeah, well, and it's challenging times for me too, right? As a civil rights lawyer, professor, these issues weigh heavy on my mind. And I would say to your industry, as difficult as it may be sometimes, to thine own self be true and do the right thing. Frankly, the real estate industry has had a troubled past when it relates to housing discrimination. And I'm not going to revisit that. You can read that in the history books. What I'm going to say, though, is let's change it for the future. Okay, and let's look at how we can be and how you can be a part of building stronger, more integrated communities, and how you can do that through your work with clients, through your work within your particular agency, and what you are doing in terms of as a company to address these issues on every level of your company. So, for example, the narrative that we hear when we hear, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so I remember it before it was the way that it is now. And when you hear of what is going on in the south side of Chicago, it's not because people of color are inherently bad or more violent than anyone else. It is because of the frustrations that people are feeling that are bubbling to the surface that leave them with no hope for the future in terms of their housing circumstance, their economic circumstance, and their life. So this is why kids at age 12, 15, 21 are picking up a gun instead of picking up a school book, because they just see no future. They see no way out of their current situation. And maybe we can help them see a way out. Be cognizant of your unconscious bias when you're working with clients, as well as your conscious bias. If someone says, you know, I don't want to live in a particular community, or I don't want to live next to Black people or immigrants or ex-offenders or in affordable housing situations because it brings those kinds of people in it. I hate to say it, but maybe that's a listing that you're not going to take. Maybe that's a client that isn't good for you. And on the unconscious bias piece, recognize that we all have unconscious bias. I have unconscious bias. And the first step to moving past that is to recognize it and get it out of the shame category and say, how can I move forward for it? Realtors in the real estate industry really have a very, very special role, almost a fiduciary role, I'll say, in creating the kind of sustained and integrated communities envisioned by the Fair Housing Act. And if there is one message that I would, want everyone listening this to take away, it would be that.
Allison, thank you so much. One of the interesting things you mentioned, the unconscious bias. NAR has just made an incredible video that addresses implicit bias, which is the same thing we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who's listening, if you want to be more aware of that, it's a great video because it does make you stop and think, oh man, I thought I was better than that. I thought I was better than that. One of the things that we're going to be doing in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be hoping that all of the companies that are members of our association will be showing their members that video to make us more aware of what's going on with all of those kinds of things. Correct. Allison, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed having you with me this morning. And I know that you're busy. This is your first week of school, you told me. Yes. So I doubly appreciate the fact that you have taken and your going back to school doesn't look exactly like it did last year, does it?
No, it does not. It's new times for everyone, including for law schools with the online learning. But I will say too that this is what's going on in the courts. Like most of the case, the courts are now using remote hearings and Zoom and so forth. So this is going to be part of the future, even when we come on the other side of the pandemic.
I have to tell you, we're going to have to be lifelong learners. It's just not going to stop. Anyway, Allison, thank you so much for being with us. For those of you who are listening, please listen. We have two more. We have the video, the series that we're going to do about the implicit bias. And then the last series we're going to be inviting some of the past presidents of the Women's Council to chat with us. Again, Allison, thank you so much. Really appreciated being with you.
Bye. Thank you.